Systems engaged. Frequencies synchronized. Prepare for incoming transmission. Coming to you from somewhere in the multiverse, this is Robots from Tomorrow. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and as always your podcatcher of choice. For the full archive featuring over 800 episodes of comics and comics-friendly content like interviews, book discussions, and freeform tomfoolery, please go to robotsfromtomorrow.net. Here is your host, Greg.
Hello, and welcome to Robots from Tomorrow, or welcome back to Robots from Tomorrow, whichever the case may be. My name is Greg. Thank you for joining us. Today's show is my talk with Aditya Bidikar about his first mainstream writing work, In Your Skin. We have a great chat about Bollywood and male gaze and parasociality and dancing and Satoshi Kon and Ram V and, well, we'll get to that in a minute. You may have noticed your Robots podcast feed updating over the weekend. That's because we released both parts of the Robots Remastered version of Aditya and I talking with lettering legend and friend of the show, John Workman. Robots Remastered. Better audio, shorter runtime, more bang for no bucks. What more can you want? Coming next week on May 14th is J. Marshall Smith talking about his recent graphic novel Testament, which throws together space exploration with spirituality, what man creates in his own image and what we leave behind, and other stuff. I'm really looking forward to getting this one off my hard drive and into your ears. And then our weekly sprint continues on May 21st with Sydney Halpern and Trygve Fast for their first graphic novel, Infected for Science, looking at a group of conscientious objectors during World War II who signed up for an even more dangerous mission, letting the government infect them with hepatitis to help scientists learn more about the disease sickening soldiers on the front line. We then close out the month on May 28th with writer Josh Dysart returning to the show to talk about his new horror miniseries from Bad Idea called The Hab with David Lapham and Bill Sienkiewicz. So, with all that in place, let's get into my chat about the new image miniseries In Your Skin with writer, letterer, Aditya Bidikar. My guest today, back on the show after 4 years, is a man of letters in the most literal sense. He is one of the best letterers working in comics today. In the more than a decade he has been plying that trade, he has worked with every major North American comics publisher and formed strong collaborations with several groups of creators, none more so than with writer Ram V and artist Anand K. In the words of Multiversity alum and sketch guru David Harper, it is a career consisting of, quote, all bangers, unquote. But he's on the show today to talk about In Your Skin, his first major work as a comics writer. In Your Skin, with artist Sam and colorist Francesco Segala for Image Comics and Tiny Onion, and released on April 22nd, combines Bollywood culture with body horror and erotic fiction. The solicitation also name-checks David Cronenberg and The Substance. I would throw in some Scorsese and Satoshi Kon as well, but we'll get into that. We find today's guest at a fairly unique point in comics. A first-time comics writer with years of experience making comics, a letterer making his own words fit onto a page of his own story, a perennial collaborator stepping into a lead role. However you want to look at it, this is a fascinating time to be Aditya Bidikar, and I cannot wait to talk to him about it. Aditya, how are you doing?
Good. Much better after that introduction. I should wheel you out every time I need somebody to introduce me.
Well, this is being recorded, so you can have that as your intro music.
Yeah, carry that with me. Little voice note. But yeah, I'm doing good. It's the 19th of April, so we are 3 days from the release of the book, and I would say I'm equally nervous and excited.
Huh, okay. I mean, you should be excited. I guess the nervous thing, having read the book, I'm like, you don't really have anything to worry about, but it's
Thank
one
you.
thing to say that. The creatives on the other end are just like, you can tell me that, but my body's just not feeling it. So like I said, it's been 4 years. This is actually your first solo appearance. The last time you were on was, of course, our marathon conversation with John Workman. I've been re-editing that to prepare for this. So that'll be back on the feed, a little easier for people to find. You and John go deep into lettering process and thoughts and about other stuff and comics. It is still one of my favorite episodes.
It was an absolute highlight for me as well.
Thankfully, I don't have to do that type of deep dive into lettering in this conversation because we already did it with one of the greats 4 years ago. So that gives me a chance to really dive into In Your Skin, which, man, it's good. Again,
Thank
I
you.
don't think you have to worry. But before we get too far into it, could you give us the pitch for In Your Skin?
She's grown up with Aisha Sen's movies. She's learned the dialogue. She's kind of learned the dances beat for beat. She's kind of made her life around Aisha Sen's personality, essentially, as she perceives it.
Mhm.
And she gets the opportunity to meet her at some point of time, and then something goes wrong there. And then Aisha announces her retirement. And Priyanka feels like, okay, if she's not going to live the life she's supposed to, then
Mhm.
Priyanka would be happy to take her turn in the spotlight.
I read the book and I did not feel that I missed anything in terms of Bollywood or that culture, but I feel like I would like a little more of a primer of how dance fits into the Bollywood aesthetic versus like Hollywood type of thing. Because I feel like Hollywood is that's a very siloed thing. How would you describe the importance of dance in the Bollywood identity? Is it as married to the overall as it seems to be?
In Hollywood, the musicals are kind of siloed off to the side, like
Mhm.
their particular category of film. In Bollywood, I would say it's the opposite, where for a long time, movies without dance sequences and song sequences were kind of like the exception.
Mm,
So
mhm,
even those would often have songs specifically composed for them, but those would, in a more like Martin Scorsese manner, let's say, played in the background or something like that.
mm,
But
mhm,
they would be
mhm,
specifically composed for them still. So even now, the most sort of non-commercial movie with no songs, like none of the characters burst into song, even
mhm,
those will have like a few songs composed for the soundtrack. But other than those off to the side movies, we used to literally call it like parallel cinema because it's
mhm,
parallel to the mainstream. Mainstream Indian cinema absolutely comprised entirely of musicals. I would say this was true till about like 2005 or so. After that, it's
mm,
kind of changed a bunch. But like when I was growing up, even the most like gritty action movie would have a song and dance sequence with our gruff hero like trying his best to dance. So
uh-huh,
like there are actors known in Bollywood for their dancing. There are
mhm,
actors known in Bollywood for having two left feet and like not knowing how to dance, but we still love them anyway, essentially. And
yeah,
once in a while in conversation we would actually talk about like, okay, how in that movie would have been probably been better with no songs. But
mhm,
it was just sort of the thing you did. So
yeah,
I would also say that unlike musicals, where the point of a song is to sort of sing your emotions, right? Like the
mhm,
thing that you wouldn't say in the normal course of the film, you kind of say through song. Bollywood, the better ones would do that. Like the better movies where there was more thought behind the production would try and make sure that the songs were essentially like essential to the plot of the film or like the way the film is being told.
mhm,
But honestly, I will say like there are several movies where like two of the songs are like plot related, while the others are all just like the action stops, like everything stops, and that's just the song. Right.
huh,
Um,
okay,
yeah. So yeah, I would also say like if I'm trying to kind of analyze here, I would also say that because Bollywood was so repressed for a very long time, you would not be showing any kind of sexual contact or even implying it. So, like, the most erotic thing that might happen would be like two people are sitting next to a fire and they draw closer to each other, and then the movie cuts to like two flowers touching or something like
uh,
that
uh-huh,
to show, like, okay, this is what's happening.
yeah, yeah,
So, I feel like maybe the song and dance sequence was also a substitute for the sex scene
mm,
there,
mhm,
like where okay, I don't think like in the plot it would be implied that they are having sex, but the idea is that okay, they are becoming intimate with each other. So I would say like till like 2000 to 2005, song and dance is absolutely essential. And now coming to Priyanka's approach, she's obsessed with one particular actor's dances. So that was also a thing, like a
mhm,
particular actor or actress, like a male or female actor, would be known for their specific kind of dancing, like style of dancing, where often like some people were considered to be a little bit like old school, while others would take inspiration from like Western dancing to kind of integrate something into their style.
mhm,
And there are also actors like, for example, a Madhuri Dixit or a Sri Devi both of whom are inspirations, like both of whom also make like small cameos in this book in the background. They would be associated with specific choreographers. So like there would be a choreographer who would kind of compose a dance for this person specifically. So like there was a stylistic thing to it, like dancing like somebody was the whole thing. Like, for example, like there was this actor called Hrithik Roshan who came up, I think around 2008 or so. And like his dances revolutionized what cool and sexy dancing is in Bollywood, right? Like he felt much more modern. He felt much more like willing to use his limbs as a dancer in a way that previous actors who would stand in one place while the female actor danced around them, like, these guys were doing something new. Like there's a whole thing here. There's any Indian reading this book would immediately get what this idea is, that like being obsessed with one person's dances, like, that means something. So I think that kind of answers your question there.
Yeah, and I got it immediately. So that really becomes one of the pillars of setting up who Priyanka is and what her deal is. I do think it's fascinating. This isn't necessarily in the book, but just Bollywood being almost this like Galapagos Islands of Hollywood, put off to the side and allowed to evolve in its own way. And so the parallel to it and like what got picked up and what didn't and those sort of things. And oh man, it's fascinating. Not the subject of this podcast, but
talking about, like, I've had this conversation with a lot of people where you can sort of see the people that each movement in Bollywood is reacting to. Like directors that I tend to prefer are people who do like more grounded drama. And you can see them reacting to people like Scorsese or like a Coppola or often even like a Kurosawa or an Ozu. And you can see those influences coming in, where even in the musicals, you can see different musical styles playing a part. Often in the songs themselves, you can see a lot more genre influence. Like, I mean, it's always happening like 10 to 15 years late. Actually used to, I would say now it's like a lot more immediate. But you can trace when rock music makes its way to Indian composers' ears. For example, a lot of Bollywood music right now involves hip hop. So there's a lot of rap involved, hip hop rhythms, etc. So you can see those kind of the international music scene playing a part in this, but not necessarily directly. Of course, there were composers who would like literally rip off songs and like pass them off as their own, but that happens less because everybody's got access to all of this music. Like if you rip off Sabrina Carpenter right now, like people will know.
So part and parcel to that is obviously dance is about movement and sound, none of which happens in comics. Your comic opens with a dance montage. Talk about the challenges or whatever of trying to get across as much of that movement and whatever as possible in a medium that has neither movement or sound.
That was a huge concern when I was composing the script and when Som was drawing it. I mean, honestly, it has the much larger burden here, I would say.
Right.
But I knew very early on that it's kind of pointless to put lyrics in the book or something like that, like to kind of show you that there's music happening. And I'm also like, while I'm very happy lettering it, I am not necessarily a big fan of like musical notation in comics as well. Partly because people who can read music have told me like it's usually nonsense. I'm very happy to imply that, okay, somebody's singing or something like that, but I don't think it should play a big rhythmic part in the thing. But that doesn't necessarily matter because comics have a rhythm of their own. Like composing a panel is sort of working to a beat, if not to a melody, I see. So I did kind of make sure that every version of the script I wrote and then every version of the thumbnails, I was trying to kind of see whether there's a rhythm playing behind the dance. Like, do you feel like you're traveling through time in that dance? And I hope the answer is yes. Like, I hope that the poses that we've chosen create enough of a distance in time to make you feel like there's a dance happening. But of course, we're going to do that. And then the reader's going to read what they read. But Som put in a lot of work on that. He actually would play like a lot of specific dances and he composed a dance style for Aisha, which like I hadn't really done that. I just had like a couple of poses in my head, but that's about it. He kind of made it flow beautifully. There's this wonderful mirroring happening between Aisha and Priyanka in that first dance sequence, which I've then gone on to use in my script in issue 2, 3 and like beyond. But while it really helped that Som is familiar with the world. I didn't know that he had actually worked in Bollywood when I pitched him the book.
Okay.
So I just loved his artwork. Eric, our editor, actually brought up Crocodile Black and said that, look, if you're thinking of artists, I think Som might be interesting because he is Indian and like he can draw a comic and he will understand most of your references. And I was like, okay, I know this guy's work. I followed Som's work for a very long time. He's done these paintings and artwork. I met him a long time ago, and like each of us assumed that we didn't remember the meeting, but we did. And I think at the time, like he tells me that I encouraged him to get into comics at some point of time. I guess this is partly my fault. But then when we met, I pitched him the book. And that's when he told me like, hey, I've actually worked in this world. He did production design on this movie called Court. He has even directed a short animated movie, which is beautiful. It's called Death of a Father and it's available on YouTube. And he's worked in VFX and production design on a lot of Bollywood movies that I had seen even. So that turned out to be handy because it meant that there was a lot less research for me to do. And I could even ask him for stuff where I would be like, okay, here's the scene I'm writing. How would this happen if it was happening on a set? And then I'll compose around it and then you can correct it and we can fix the dialogue based on that. So it was very handy. Also, like none of the Bollywood people in our book are actually from like the real Bollywood because obviously like there's that sort of like line of verisimilitude you're playing with. Right. And if you fall on the wrong side of it, if they're surrounded by too many real people, then your characters might start to feel a little fake. So instead, like I've created like this sort of parallel version of Bollywood that they exist in. All the names are like close enough for Indian people to understand like a couple of references like this might be. So he kind of got all of those references. He exactly knew like there's this character called Arman Khan, for example, like he's kind of constantly going to be wearing his dark glasses, even indoors, even in the dark, because he's that kind of guy. While then like this producer we have called Kamal Anand, he's this kind of guy, you know, so he understands all my references, at least partly because he's also worked with it.
So that probably saved a whole lot of effort just because you didn't have to educate him on all this stuff. He's like, no, I'm good. I see where you're going. Yeah. Okay. As I was reading this, my brain is just sort of firing and I'm thinking like Perfect Blue. I'm thinking, and not in terms of anything specific, but like that Satoshi Kon thing is going. And
the funny thing is I'd not watched Perfect Blue when I wrote this.
Oh.
I watched Perfect Blue like a couple of months ago and I was like, there's so much I would have done differently if I'd watched this.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I didn't because it's sort of like it's a convergent evolution thing. It's like Satoshi Kon and I, like we are both thinking of similar things here. And so we kind of reach some similar conclusions. But I would say like Priyanka wouldn't have looked like she does if I had read Perfect Blue. I'd watched Perfect Blue up then.
Yeah.
I would have been too conscious about it, but I'm glad I hadn't because I really liked how she has ended up.
It's more purely you as opposed to having something else make you have to go in a different direction. So looking at that work, it's men sort of inflicting violence on women for their need to have these women be these perfect whatevers. In Your Skin, there's no gender difference, but it feels like there is still that male gaze there. It's just not coming from an actual man. Can you talk a little about Priyanka internalizing that type of idea and how it maybe put her on the path that we find her at the beginning of the book?
Yeah. Do you mind if I kind of go on for a little long on this? Because I've got a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah. Go. It's all you.
So I was asked on another interview whether I could have done this with either one of them or both of them being men. I think their question was much more about like, oh, are you trying to like write about women to like empower women or something like that? And I was like, not quite. The thing is like the specific things that I find concerning and interesting about Bollywood and about the culture that like pop culture we live in, both a female celebrity and a female fan. Right. And then once you kind of make that decision, you have to think about what world do they exist in and what that world does to them. So as you'll see in issue 2 begins with a flashback, not really a flashback, but like essentially it's Aisha's version of how she got to the same place. you see the part that men play here, and not just in a direct way, but essentially we all live in a patriarchal society,
Mhm.
and that plays a part. Like, I find myself talking to some people who kind of misunderstand what the male gaze, like the term the male gaze means, because they think that a woman doesn't have a male gaze, but that's not what that is, right? It's like the idea is that you live in this society, like men look at women, but women look at men looking at women, right? Like the John Berger ways of seeing things.
Mhm.
So essentially, like you are in some sense trapped in the world that you've come up in, and it doesn't just have to be about gender. You can say this about capitalism versus communism. For example, there are so many people that I've talked to. I think now it's less because now the political conversation has gotten a lot more heated, one might say, or the seams are showing to a degree.
Mhm.
But there was a time when you could talk to somebody about things that are bad about capitalism. But they would be like, oh, yeah, but you can try and fix some of these things, but capitalism will never be challenged. All right.
Mhm.
Because they're like a fish who cannot see the water. I feel like there's a component of this within patriarchal society. There are women doing very interesting work trying to create a female imaginary within this. Two of my favorite recent films were Portrait of a Lady on Fire by Celine Sciamma and this German movie called The Sound of Falling, where it's two women trying to create a new way from scratch of women looking at women. And of course, like this is like essentially it's like a performance, right? Like it's like you can't actually do that. You can't actually like take away everything that has happened, everything in history, and then kind of start from scratch. But what if
Mhm.
we could start from scratch? So their kind of work is very interesting to me in this, where you're trying to kind of how do we escape this, right? So my book doesn't necessarily try to do that because I'm not a woman, so I don't necessarily feel like it's my place to kind of try and break that down and write like something of that kind. But what I can do is to take these two specific women that I feel are interesting, given their positions in society, given their positions with regard to each other, given their emotionality towards each other, particularly like Priyanka's towards Aisha. And I found it very interesting to kind of then look at how the men in their life affect them, how much power each one has or can exert. So much of this is psychological because like there's
Mhm.
often you have power that you don't know you have, or you exert power that you thought you had, but then you find out you didn't have that power.
Mhm.
Right. So each of them are going to be dealing with some things on those sort. So like, yeah, like it's definitely very, very interesting to me. And coming to the men, partly I just found the idea funny that what if I treated the men in this story the way women tend to get treated in stories about men? What if they're sort of off to the side? I wouldn't say barely categorized, like I have very strong ideas of both of these men, but you don't necessarily see all of that characterization in the story because
Right.
the men are not what the story is about. So part of me just found that funny, just to do that.
Mhm.
And partly I felt like maleness exerted as a force without necessarily having an origin at every time.
Mhm.
Like both Priyanka and Aisha are reacting to men in general, but not specific men necessarily.
Right.
Like the place they are in is built with all the interactions that they have had in society with the men and the women in their past. And that kind of plays a part. Like you see some of that when Priyanka is talking to her mother. But again, there's a
Yes.
reason it's her mother, not her father.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So I just found this interesting. Like I'm not necessarily making any kind of statement out of this, but I just felt like this is the way the story needs to go to kind of work.
Yeah. It was very interesting. I think you do a really good job of setting up Priyanka, and that was actually a question I had maybe a little later about her being mm, let me come back to that. There's a difference between Priyanka wanting to be with Aisha and Priyanka wanting to be Aisha. They're
Hmm.
two different impulses, but they're also sort of the same. Where does that understanding come for you? I don't know if that question really stuck the landing on that one.
I think what the question is to some
Right.
degree. Do you mind if I have a bash at answering it, and then
Please
if I've
save.
not done a good job, like you can
No,
correct
no,
me.
no, it's fine. Save me from.
Um, there's so much that happens in life in our interactions with people where we don't know if we want to be close to somebody or we want to be like somebody. It's something that a child doesn't always know how to differentiate between. But as an adult, like hopefully we learn how to do a better job of not confusing the two things. But as a queer person, this is something that at different times in my life I have had to think about.
Mhm.
Like, is it an attraction or is it a desire to be more like? Like, is it a desire to find myself in something or is it a desire to just be close to something? Right. And the answer is different for different things, but it's worth thinking about. And it's different at different times, honestly. Like, there are times when I had to go through a period when I wanted to be something to come back to thinking that, oh, I don't want to be that. I just want to think about that. I just want to be interested in that. And this again, like, is not necessarily about gender and sexuality only. It's about different things. Like, I'm sure you can kind of take a Freudian lens here and think about like how much a son or a daughter wants to be like their parent or avoid being like their parent and therefore react to something. It's all fairly complicated. And I felt like a person like Priyanka would specifically have this difficulty telling those things apart and therefore want to destroy the difference between those two things. And there's a sequence in there where I feel like this is made most clear, but I don't know if that comes through, which is the time between her meeting with Aisha and her decision to do what she does. Like there is a space between that. And that space is a space of darkness for a reason. If you can see what I'm saying there.
I am scrolling right to it in the PDF right now just to be like, yeah, that is metaphorical, but also
so that's
sort of
something that
literal.
I've tried not to say out loud exactly, but try to kind of do this through some art.
Do you think if the inciting incident had gone the way Priyanka had wanted it to, she would have accepted that connection and moved on to something else?
I don't know if that's something that I want to give the answer to.
Okay.
And it is directly addressed in later issues.
Okay.
Because it's sort of the crux of the thing. But again, I don't know if you'll find an answer because I feel like it's far more interesting to lay out these characters and then let the reader think about it. I don't even know whether I have a clear idea of what would have happened if, because it almost feels inevitable to me that she can't have that.
Yeah, that was a question that certainly we read these things, we have questions when we get a chance to actually talk to the author about them. In some ways, we're not, at least hopefully for me, I try not to come into it as like, what's the answer? Like there is no the answer. Even if you have an answer, like in some ways it doesn't matter what you say, but just the fact that I'm like,
you could also say that if that didn't happen, there was no story. She might still have done something kind of messed up,
right?
But it wouldn't have been the same something.
Oh no. But I guess this is a testament to you and all of the work that you guys have done on this, is that Priyanka feels enough like a real person that you feel like you could see this person maybe doing something else that would then necessitate not having a story because it would be maybe a happier ending. But there's enough stuff there. Or maybe
that would have been a short story. That would have been like a 20, 30-page short story.
Yeah. Thankfully,
that would have been something. I don't think she would have just had a nice meeting with Aisha and then walked home happy. I don't think that was going to happen at any point.
Right. I find it interesting that Priyanka knows so much about Aisha, yet she doesn't understand Aisha. And I find that, to me, that's kind of like the horror of the book, is that we can know so much about somebody, more than they do in some ways. You know, when it has that moment and it goes sort of badly, I would think, like, obviously there's no story if this happens, but Priyanka knows enough about Aisha that obviously it would go, this was obviously bad for that type of reason. It's fine. It's not about you. It's just awkward.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that idea was a conscious thing that you wanted to play out in at least the first part of this story. And getting back to like the internet and knowing how much we know about people and how much we are fed about people that we don't even necessarily seek out, right? In the marketing of all of these things and in this culture, it's just like, this person, they've done all this stuff and they're retiring and they're having a kid and blah, 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 blah. We get all of this information and yet we are still strangers to each other.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a little bit.
That's far more explicit an issue too. The flashback to Aisha's journey to this moment that I mentioned, partly to make clear that the idea that Priyanka had about Aisha's life is not simply wrong, it's kind of misguided to try and encompass somebody's life from the information that you have about them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's so much that Priyanka is missing because some of this information is private.
Mm-hmm.
Some is because Aisha is consciously putting on a performance in public because she's a celebrity. Like she's not necessarily going to let certain things about her out in the public. And funnily enough, like a couple of days ago, I watched this movie called The Drama by Christopher Bogley, which is currently making waves. Like it's Robert Pattinson and Zendaya. And it's about like a bit of a hot button issue. But what the movie is actually about is this. Like we get pieces of information about somebody and in our head, we create a person. But that person and the real person are not necessarily the same person. And we are never going to know everything there is to know about the person in front of us. And the person that we've created in our head is never going to be one-to-one the person we are in front of. And that movie is about characters in an intimate relationship trying to navigate this. While what I'm trying to do here is about like more of a public thing, where like I've said this before, that a big inspiration for this book was me looking at parasocial relationships on the internet and immediately understanding how messed up it is because this is a performance and you're mistaking this for a person. Right. Like that celeb, like whoever that, even that is Twitch streamer who does it for 8 hours a day is not that person. Like that's just not something that happens. And then there's of course like just the act of observation. Like let's say somebody was online 24 hours. Like we've seen this with Big Brother. The idea that the people on Big Brother are behaving authentically is ridiculous. Like that's not what's happening. Sure, they might over time get tired of performing too much and they kind of might land on something that they are comfortable with, but that's still not the real person like that. But who knows, is there something, such a thing as a real person? Like, is there something that is irreducible about any one person? So that's something that kind of constantly plays a part in the story. Like I'm not going to like slag things here, but there's going to be like several moments where a piece of information you were given at a particular point and a piece of information you're given here don't quite match. And that's because of this. Like it's because the information is being provided from different perspectives. And that perspective plays a part in what the information is. So yeah, that's something that is very important in the story. Like I would say that then goes to add to the essentially fundamental philosophical question of the story, which is what separates you from another person? Like, is it just the physical distance? Is it the fact that each of us has this skin, which is this membrane that separates us from the rest of the world? If this membrane is destroyed, do we suddenly become one with the rest of the world? Do we become one with this other person if we manage to don their skin? Again, I'm not interested in answers. I'm just interesting questions.
But yeah, that was the thing that kept coming back to me. There is real body horror in this book, but the thing that was scarier, probably because it is something that we see every day, is that disconnect between being fed all of this information about people. And the real horror is that it's one particular thing. It's that understanding that information does not equal person. It's that final piece that can make somebody know a lot about something or somebody and not make the leap that Priyanka makes, and that is scary because it's not like, there's no way to stop somebody from doing all of this. You're like, no, like education or even just like a cultural thing of just learning early on that, not being fed this diet of, find out about your heroes or find out about your stars, be like them, do their thing, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like that was always kind of there, but it didn't come at us, 28 hours a day like it does
Yeah,
now. But it also was buffered by the real sort of understanding that ultimately we will never know each other, or that there is a person that, even just because somebody's yelling, this like PR stuff is putting out all of these things about no this, no that, like there is
yeah,
intent behind it. Learn to discern, which is hard. It's always hard. And now it's like things are coming at us faster than we have a chance to even think about it. So we're almost absorbing it just
yeah.
yeah, horrific.
I would also say the other side has kind of gotten messed up as well, where there was a time when being a celebrity was a very specific thing, right?
Mhm.
Like you were either an actor in national level movies, or you were a national level sportsman, or a performer, like an international performer. But now, like the person who lives down from me might be a micro celebrity and might have a smaller audience, but just as rabid an audience. Like I have several friends here who are content creators online, and they've gotten weird messages. And a friend of mine, he's a micro celebrity, let's call it. He was doing a performance, and somebody literally walked up to him and asked for an autograph in the middle of his performance, where they couldn't separate the person from the performance at all.
Mhm.
He was like, "Okay, I'm working right now. Like this is not like me. Like 800 people are looking at me right now and at you right now. And why don't you just like sit back down and we'll talk later?" And she
Yeah.
was just like, "Yeah, but like you're the guy from the thing."
Oh.
And because a lot of these content creators supposed to be presenting their own authentic personalities,
Mhm.
there's this continued sort of thing where, oh, that's the real you, like that's you, and I know you. And I feel like it's kind of more dangerous when it's so spread out and diffuse, because if you have an industry, then you have other people who have faced the same thing and who can sort of help you out and train you to handle some of this stuff. But
Mhm.
if you're just like a person who recorded yourself on the phone and 15 days later you're a celebrity, how the hell do you know how to handle it? And you can see this affecting people where there are YouTube streamers who mistook the character that the fandom thought they were as themselves. Like they started becoming that person because they
Mhm.
couldn't distinguish between who they are and who the performance is.
Mhm.
Right. And that's, I think, where it gets messed up, where there are no guardrails to this at all. Like there was a point at which there were some guardrails. And of course, it was messed up. Like, I'm not going to say like Bollywood or Hollywood at its peak was a good industry,
No.
but at least there's some kind of system in place where you knew where you stood.
Mhm.
And now, like, it's a little strange because there's no such distinction.
Yeah. We went from 0 to 60 without any of the stuff in between. So now we're just like, what
Yeah.
the hell? I think I might have mentioned this a little earlier. Getting into, setting up Priyanka, I would think you as a writer would want me to be invested in her and to see that she's not a monster starting off. Like the scene with her mother. She's talking with her mother, and her mother is being the way that she is, and Priyanka is bristling at things, and I feel the bristle with her. And I was like, oh man, that's kind of fucked up. Talking about it writing wise, talk about how much sympathy you want the reader to have with Priyanka before things go off the rail. Was that an easy thing to figure out?
I don't think I thought about this too hard till I sent the script to people to read. And these are people who I trust, who are going to give me early feedback. Because I feel like it's not something you can 100% control. Like, I cannot control how sympathetic people are going to find Priyanka, because we have like 4 or 5 scenes before things kind of happen. And each of those 4 or 5 scenes, if the person has a particular relationship with that kind of thing, they might have
Mm,
a particular feeling based on that scene.
mhm,
My hope is that in the aggregate, you are interested in Priyanka, even if you're not necessarily sympathetic towards her.
mhm.
I am somewhat sympathetic towards her. I find her interesting as a person, and I find myself with some sympathy towards her. And I would like to try and convey that, but I know that it's not maths. Like there could be a version of the script where all of this is laid out.
Mhm.
But that's not a version of the script I was interested in, right? Like I was
Right.
interested in having these things unfold and the reader gets to make their decision about how they feel about Priyanka. I'm perfectly okay with somebody thinking of Priyanka as an entirely positive protagonist to an entirely negative protagonist. I generally don't think of characters that way at all. I don't think of like, okay, she's this person good and this person bad. Like that's on the equation. I
Mhm.
just think that a character has a duty to be interesting.
Mhm.
And the story that unfolds has to kind of tie into what the character's experiencing. And I hope that works. Like, I
Yeah.
understand that there's a chance that some people might just be alienated enough by Priyanka that, okay, they just don't want to read the rest of the book. And I'm like, I can't fault you for it.
Mhm.
Because there are books that I've picked up where I'm like, oh, this person is just too unpleasant. Like, you can't read this. But I never think that that's the author's fault for doing so. And sometimes I've come back to those books and then suddenly, like, with 10 years behind me, I have a different point of view on it. And maybe I find them just as unpleasant, but a lot more understandable. And then I enjoy the thing. Sometimes I don't. And I think, like, so for example, like one of my favorite books is Moby Dick. And the narrator of Moby Dick is a pompous jackass throughout.
Uh-huh.
But that's half the fun. Right?
Yeah.
Like you're seeing things that he's refusing to see.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you get to sort of like, oh, you just don't understand what's going on here at all, do you? You know, that's part of the fun. So
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily I need the protagonist to be likable. And I mean, that's not the question you asked anyway. But how unlikable she is or how sympathetic the audience finds her is sort of up to each reader.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if I would ever say that I want people to like her,
Right.
but I at least want people to feel for her.
Yeah, and that certainly comes across. There's enough in there that she is not one note. You do a good job at a relatively compact space of setting up Priyanka as being,
Yeah.
and I just made a visual thing that nobody will be able to hear. Yeah.
This is not even something I was thinking about while I was writing it, but I think back to most of my favorite genre stories, like whether they are fantasy, horror, science fiction. I find myself the most invested when the characters are written like in a drama.
Mhm.
It's very easy in a genre to fall back on tropes and to kind of let them do the work for you. And each character falls into a type of some kind. And therefore, like there's a shortcut to what this character is supposed to be and what you're supposed to think about them.
Mhm.
I find myself the most interested in books that don't do, like something like Game of Thrones, for example. Like it's written like a drama most of the time. Or like the original Alien, Blade Runner. Or like it's not a really genre movie, but it reads like a genre movie to me in some ways.
Right.
The cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover. The characters are written like a drama. Like there's this potency to every line that they're saying.
Yeah, like Andor.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like
Okay.
it's funny. It's political science fiction, right? But
Yeah.
because it's written like a drama, you kind of feel a lot more.
Yeah.
I forget that it's a very romantic show rather than a realistic show.
Yeah, like not even political science fiction. Like it's Star Wars, right? Like it is a
Yeah.
genre within a
Oh,
genre
sure,
within a
yeah.
genre. And then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, no, we're going to treat it like political science fiction. Or we're going to treat it like an actual drama. And you're just like,
Exactly.
oh my
Yeah.
God, this is amazing. I didn't think Star Wars could support this. And you're like, oh, it does when it's done with this other thing. Also, to annoying, well, not annoying, but the mother characters, both of them make you feel maybe a slight slash of sympathy.
Yeah.
With,
there you go. You're right.
yeah,
You're right.
'cause,
I
you know,
think actually when I watched Standoff season 1, that might have struck me like as something to take inspiration from. But by the time I was writing the scene, I'd forgotten about it.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't remember his. Oh, Cyril. Yeah. You're like, God,
Cyril,
he's a prick. And then you see the mother thing, you're like, well, I mean, he is, but still, like having to. Yeah. Again, you can kind of see maybe a little.
Well, it's kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So talking about the characters and discovering this book through your collaborations with Sam, you talked with David Harper and he had asked about when you first start seeing the art, the book sort of becomes real to you. And it was something that you're like, that's a bit of a cliche. And then it finally happened to you for this book. And you're like, oh my God, that is absolutely true. At the risk of sounding pedantic, I want to kind of unpack that a little bit because art You saw character designs for Priyanka. You're seeing thumbnails of scenes that went from being just words on a page to an actual like beat, 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 beat on a page. Did seeing the character designs for Priyanka change how you thought about her, even at that stage? Having some sort of image in your head.
Yeah.
It seems like this is the story coming into focus for you. And I can see how getting a full page of art, even if it's not colored, can be like, oh man, this is real for me. But I'm curious about
Yeah.
the steps up to that, because you're the writer, you're also sort of the showrunner. So you're seeing everything iterate in a way that it's emotionally resonant to you because this is your book, as opposed to another book, like if you're working on one of Ram's books and you're seeing it,
Yeah.
but you're one step removed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like issue 1 is the most redrafted issue of the series,
Mhm.
in the sense of after the thumbnails were done, I copy pasted the script onto the page and then rewrote it a bunch of times. Like the conversation with the mother was rewritten like 3 times. There's a scene later that was rewritten like 3 times. It's a very pivotal scene.
Mhm.
It's because before Som drew her, in my head, Priyanka had a certain body language.
Mhm.
But the thing that Som's done is not quite that, but it replaced what I had in my head. So then, because she moved differently, she started speaking differently.
Mm.
She started reacting differently to Nachiket, to her mother, etc. And there was a one scene that was entirely replaced. Like there's a scene in the original script that's just not there in the final one, because I wrote a different scene instead of it with far
Mhm.
fewer words, because of something that Som pointed out that, hey, I think if we do something like this, it might be more interesting. So like a 3-page scene became 1 page and it was a different scene entirely. There was like about 5 or 6 other pages that I kind of had already been deleted by the time the script had gone to Som. But like looking at in prose, a character is entirely between you and the reader,
Mhm.
right? Like the writer and the reader.
Mhm.
In comics, it's actually, I feel, far more between the artist and the reader. I always felt this, but it was good to have it confirmed that while I've written the script, while I've written the dialogue, and while I've created the concept originally, Som is telling the story.
Mhm.
And I am like kind of riding his, well, I wouldn't say as far as to say coattails, but I'm riding on his shoulder or something, and sort of like trying to synthesize what he's done with a bunch of words so that the reader can get something that hopefully I also want them to get.
Mhm.
All right. And in doing so, sometimes I will redirect so. Sometimes I will say that, hey, that particular pose is not working, that angle is not working, something like that in the thumbnails.
Mhm.
But most of the time, I'm kind of trying to work with what he's done. I'm trying
Mhm.
to see that, okay, I wrote this and that made him feel a certain way and he drew this. And now we work with that thing. That the script is now gone and we are
Mhm.
working with this, which happens in a film as well, right? Like you've written a screenplay, but then when the director gets their hands on it, the director does the mise en scène, the director, like there's costumes, cinematography, all of those things. And then the
Mhm.
script is just like a thrown away. Like that's just the
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
You now need to react here. Like, so if the writer is on set, they might like write new dialogue, etc., because that's the thing that's happening. And then
Mhm.
again in
Mhm.
the edit, you're kind
Mhm.
of like,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
so I was definitely very conscious of the fact that the script is essentially like a blueprint. It's not the thing, it's the thing that leads to the thing. And
Mhm.
once
Mhm.
the actual thing has happened, you can't hold
Yeah.
on to the blueprint. You
Right.
have to react to this. And
Right.
thankfully, I have a collaborator who made it so much better. Like I honestly, Som did things like Priyanka's home design, the home decor, is
Mhm.
something that like Som came up with based on things that both he and I have seen in Mumbai. The places in Mumbai this happens in are mostly Som's choice. Like once in a while, I would call out like, okay, I want this to happen in this part of Mumbai. But then half the
Mhm.
time, that's not what he did. Like he did something else that was far more interesting. And he would check with me. Like he never like just went off and did his own thing. He was like,
Mhm.
okay, you've got the set here, but what if we move the set to this part of the city and then I could put this in the background? And I would be
Mhm.
like, yeah, like, please. I mean, you're basically like adding work for yourself. Why would
Right.
I say no?
Right.
So then by the time I got to writing issue 2, I had some art formally in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd had a bunch of conversations about how comics works for each of us. Like we had been talking over time about like how a page works, how a panel works, how the juxtaposition between two panels works. Plus, while doing things, I could suddenly like go back to conversations with my previous collaborators like Ram, Dennis,
Mhm.
Dan, Juni, where we had talked about how comics work. And then I had some new conversation. Like I had a bunch of
Mhm.
conversation with Ram, which definitely led to like issues 2 and 3 being written very differently. So like all of these things are suddenly like, okay, you outlined something 3 years ago, but now
Mhm.
it's a living document, like a living thing. And how are you going to make this better? Right.
Right.
Like Ram told me something great, which is that, the moment you've written something down, the thing in your head that you were trying to do is no longer
Mhm.
relevant. The thing that is in front of you is
Mm. Mhm.
then that is
Mhm.
what you should work from rather than trying to do like, oh, this scene misses that thing that I was trying to do. Like that's not what's happening. Now you needing to see what this scene is doing and how you can kind of direct it towards what you're trying to do in the longer run.
Yeah.
So all of these things just change the comic. And today is Sunday. I finished the final script for issue 4 yesterday and sent it off to and that's the finale, right? It's a 4-issue thing.
Right.
That script has 0 pages in common with the first draft of issue 4 that I wrote in May 2020. Like 0.
Okay.
Issue 2 has about like 70% pages in common with the original draft. Issue
Right.
3 is about like 50-50. And issue 4 is just nothing. None of the original issue 4 is still in this issue 4. And that's entirely due to this collaboration.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. You mentioned something in there that touches on something I was going to say, so it sets it up beautifully. I know I've said this somewhere before, but I need to take better notes of where I actually said it to see if I said it on air or not. But it always fascinates me that a comics writer, somebody who doesn't do any other job in comics, when they're holding a comic that they've wrote, there's like literally nothing in there that they did. Right. Like they didn't, like everything that's in there is because they were able to get somebody else to do it. Right. To draw it, to ink it, to letter it or whatever, which I find fascinating. You, however, are different than that because you got all of these people to do all of this work in collaboration with you, but then you come around on the other end to actually letter the comic. So obviously that rule doesn't apply to like cartoonists. Right. Yeah. One person doing everything. Yeah. But you are a writer that then gets to start the process, watch it, and then come around and get to literally put your words in your handwriting on the page. So you have an ownership of this in a way that Ram doesn't have with his.
Having seen Ram do his thing, I would like objectively, you're correct. There's no specific thing that Ram did that is actually on the page. But I would disagree about the ownership part. Because having worked with Ram for so long, like it's not like you don't, like I don't see Ram. Like I can see his fingerprints on everything he's done. And I could kind of like, I got to experience it when we were working on the coloring and the design aspects of it, where I'm like, oh, what you've done is so nice. And how about we add this one thing to it? How about we add? And the thing is, I had an original design idea in my head, but that's not what I told Dylan to do. Right. I told Dylan, like, I want to see what you're thinking of. I'm just going to tell you the things that are important to me. And then I gave him notes. And then you get to see what notes actually can do. Right. And I knew that because I've seen Ram do. Right. To me and to artists and to colorists and to designers. So like I know where like there are things which people will give me credit for in some of our books which Ram had suggested. And just because he suggested it rather than doing it doesn't mean that he didn't play a part in it, you know?
Right. Yeah. That is an important distinction.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's like, I think in comics, even as a director, I would say like a director doesn't hold the camera, a director doesn't act. A director doesn't write the script.
The director, you are directing you are making the choices. You are saying yes or no to all of these things that are coming to you from other people, or if it's your own internal, whatever, you're still the decision maker. The first question I was going to ask was almost going to be something like, have you had your first chat with Ram as a writer? And was it almost like him welcoming you into a club? It's like, oh, well, like, because you've had such a collaboration with him at a certain level, but now you can have conversations with him that are almost in his exact language, as opposed to you being in similar things. Now you both have not only just written comics, but been in this type of showrunner, producer type of thing. What is it like being able to relate to somebody on a different level after knowing them for so long and having your role has now expanded, not necessarily changed?
There is definitely a difference. I've always been a writer before this. Like before lettering, I used to write. I've written a bunch of short comics, but primarily I would say like I was a proser and like short stories and stuff. So Ram and I have always had conversations about storytelling. Sometimes about his storytelling. Sometimes I would say that like, hey, I don't know quite what you're trying to do with this, and then he would tell me, and we would have a conversation. Most of the time, I would agree with him. Sometimes, like especially early on, like sometimes he would change things based on that. But of course, like after that, he's written thousands of pages, so and kind of become much more proficient and like he functions at a higher level in that particular thing. But this idea of the showrunner, like, okay, here's the thing you've written, but here's the thing that's now real. And those are not quite the same thing. And the thing in between where you're collaborating, where you're trying to work with other people to either steer them towards the thing that you're trying to do or to hop on when they do something else which you think is better. Right. Those are things that are comparatively new to me. And I was in London with Anand for a few days. Like it was supposed to be like 3 days, but then a global conflagration started and our flight had to be moved. So we ended up hanging out for like a week. And when Ram, Anand, and I are in the same place, most of the time we just chat about writing, comics, art. And we had a bunch of these long discussions about like, okay, so here's how I feel this works, here's how that does. And like, the interesting thing is, I know a lot of writers who are very happy to write the script and then kind of let everybody else take the lead on what the rest of it is. Right. And they'll probably revise the script, but they won't really necessarily do anything else in terms of input. While Ram, and maybe because of working with him, I am far more hands-on about these things. That like, I'm going to try and like, okay, you've done this. Now let's see what we can do. Right. I'm not going to take the thing that the other person has done as a given, because that's how Ram has always treated me. Like I'll do something in the lettering, but Ram will be like, okay, this is a good starting point. We need to get somewhere else. Right. And the best collaborators are people who get excited. The most fun things about working with Ram for me is that he's gonna half the time turn to me and say like, Bidi, you can do better. You know, he's gonna challenge me. He's gonna be like, yeah, this is not the best you can do. I know you can do better. You're gonna do better. Right. And sometimes it's a matter of taste. Sometimes it's just like his idea of what good is and my idea of what good is slightly different. But then you also slowly start to learn the difference between where it's a viewpoint and where it's objectively like, no, this is better. And even if you don't see it now, like 5 years from now, you're going to see that what I was saying was better. Right. And that's happened a ton of times for me, where in the moment I've disagreed with Ram, done the thing that he said we should do. And then like 3 years later, I'm reading the book and I'm like, yeah, he was right.
Yeah, damn it.
He was right.
Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
So we had a lot more conversations about that stuff, where the comic is a living document. The audience, like what is an artist's duty towards the audience? What are we supposed to give them? Are we supposed to give them entertainment? Are we supposed to give them edification? Or are we supposed to do our own thing and like let them come to us? And obviously the answer is not any one thing. It's sort of like a mishmash of sometimes like, you know, I have a tendency to go a little too obtuse. And then Ram will be like, you're just being unfriendly at this point. You could be a little friendlier to the reader kind of thing. And then, of course, because we love comics, we analyze what other people have done. We analyze design choices by Hickman in East of West, or even what Dragotta's doing there. I remember having a conversation with him about like Alan Moore's Majestic short story, like at the Majestic at the End of the Universe, where you can sort of see a writer who doesn't know who's going to draw the thing and is therefore scripting it to be kind of bulletproof. And how many words that writer ends up using versus a writer like Morrison who would never do that.
Sure.
Like Morrison would always like write a very rough draft script, and when the art comes in, Morrison will sit down and kind of like flesh it out. And like the difference between what you get out of those things. Like we've had so many of these conversations, which I think all kind of play into what you end up doing. Ram is now, of course, working in other fields as well, where the writer has more or less control, as we would put it. How can you deal with that as a writer? How do you deal with the fact that once in a while, you will find as a writer that this person has not done what I wanted. And at this point of time, there's no way to get it out of them. So what do you do instead? Like what do you do? Do you try and cover, or do you do that somewhere else?
Right.
It's so many different things.
Yeah, it's interesting that problem happening more in Cape comics, but like more in mainstream comics. Some of the first writer interviews I ever read, one of them might have been like from Peter David, where he was talking about, I did this plot and I got these pages back, and all of a sudden there are dinosaurs on these pages. It's like the artist wanted to draw dinosaurs, and he's like, there's no real reason for them to be there. And talks to the editor, and it's like, look, we don't have time. You got to make it work. And I was like, okay. I would assume that wouldn't happen as much in more of like a creator-owned sort of thing. But that type of flexibility, because you could just be like, no, erase the dinosaurs. Like, we are not having dinosaurs.
Well, but it's not that simple, because there are times when you can sense. Like, I'm not even saying this is about like in your skin. Like I've done like about like 20 short comics at this point of time, and there are times when you can kind of do that, but there are times when you can sense that the artist really doesn't want to. And then your question is that, do you have the fight and leave both of you a little bit upset, but you basically got to what you wanted? Or do you value the long-term relationship and you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to let this go in this moment? On the other hand, this is just, let's say, the negative aspect. The massive positive aspect of this is that if the artist trusts you enough, they will tell you what they would like to draw. And then you have the lead time to figure out where you can fit this in. Because not every scene, as a writer, a scene is doing a bunch of things. But often a scene can be restaged in a different space, in a different way, to let the artist have more fun with it. Right. Yeah. So issue 2 has a scene which was originally on a different kind of set, but I just had in the first draft. And then I was just like, hey, I don't know if someone wants to draw that. So let me just call him. And I said, like, look, I have this scene. It's currently happening at let's say a car has crashed and like 2 people are sitting at the side of the road and they're having this conversation. We can have this anywhere you want. Like, what do you want? And he was like, can we do like a gun room? Kind of like a Matrix loading session where like they're kind of picking up their guns to go into the big fight. Can we do it that way? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that works perfectly for me. Like nothing changes. Yeah. I mean, the dialogue obviously changed because they were in a different place, but the thrust of the scene didn't change. Yeah. And of course, this is happening within the film on the set. I don't mean to say that there's a massive gun loading sequence in your skin. That's in the film, that's happening within the comic. Then there's a few panels where someone was just like, I want to draw this part of Mumbai. Is there any way we can have part of this happening there? And I was like, okay, there's this one scene which is currently happening on a random street corner. I can have it happening there. Absolutely. In issue 4, there's a device that he handed to me where he was like, I want to draw this specific thing. And I was like, oh, that's great, because I've got this scene and adding that visual motif to it will make it way more intense. So that's fun. Like, it's really kind of fun. And sometimes like the problem solving is giving you the solution, right? Like he's handing you the solution for how to stage the thing by saying like, I want to draw this.
That feels like it goes back to casting, how important casting can be in terms of starting a collaboration and having it solid enough that it can do what it needs to do in the moment, but also if it's done well, it can lead to like De Niro getting cast in Mean Streets, right? Like clearly simpatico, or like Harvey Keitel in Mean Streets, and they did a couple of movies and then Harvey sort of goes by the wayside, but then that...
like Willem Dafoe with like Yorgos Lanthimos and who's the other guy? Robert Eggers.
Not even just sort of like your muse, but also trying not to cast for the wrong reasons, as we're sort of tying things up here. You wanted to be a writer when you started in comics. You became a letterer as a way to stay in comics while the writing thing sort of worked itself out. And you've learned a lot about comics as you've been a letterer and you worked with all these collaborations and everything. And now you're coming into being able to be doing an image series. I would be remiss if I didn't point out a similar trajectory between you and the character in Your Skin. Like, you are gathering information about this thing. You're really close. You're getting like, I want to do this. It's all good. Oh, I get to have my interaction with this thing. And thankfully going in a much happier way. This book is important to you on a career level, but also obviously a personal level. How do you feel about the journey that this book has taken and where it's brought you along with it?
I'll be very honest. This one wasn't really meant as a career move of any kind. I think this was entirely, I had to do this for me. Honestly, like, that kind of emotional entanglement can often lead to a certain procrastination for me. And I think if Tiny Onion hadn't said like, hey, we want to do a book with you, I think maybe I would still have been writing like the first script or something like that. But of course, like, that is why it ended up happening. And because Tiny Onion was involved, it also is a bigger release than I might have been able to muster by myself, which I'm very thankful for. But this was a book that I would say this was a book that I had to get out of my system, but not because it's this specific book. Like, I'm sure, of course, I care a lot about the story, but it's not like a defining story for me in any way. Like, it was always meant to be like, okay, this will be my first story. Like, my first full-length story to come out. Because I will have to admit, I think when I was 16, I finished a horror novel, but it was like 26,000 words and it was a ripoff or something else. So honestly, it doesn't count. This is the first full-length thing I've finished as a writer. And that was why it was important. Because as several writers would tell you, the finishing is the important thing, right? Like, you make this and then you make the next thing. So it sounds big to say that the story has lived in my head for 7 years, but there's something that I plan to do as my third or fourth thing that has also lived in my head for that long. So by the time that comes out, it'll be like 11 years or something. Like, it's not the only thing that's been in my head for 7 years. Before I pitched this, I was working on one of the other things, which had been in my head since like 2019. So while this book is very special to me, it's extremely personal. It's not like a Harper Lee thing where I'm going to do this and then I'm going to walk away. Or it's not even like, oh, this is my big foray into writing. Because I am very happy to be a letterer and I'm going to continue being a letterer. And I am happy for the writing to stay mostly for myself. There are people who kind of do the thing that they're passionate about and then it either goes well or badly. Lettering was not my passion. Lettering was the thing I was good at, that I felt I could do every single day and have fun doing it. And of course, I like being good at what I do. So I tried to be as good as I could. And I continue to try to be as good as I can. But the thing I was passionate about was always writing. And that also meant that writing was much more stressful for me. Because every short story I wrote and I released out in the world, if people didn't like it, that felt like a personal attack. Right. With lettering, I've gotten better about it. Like, at this point of time, if people don't like In Your Skin, I'm like, okay, I mean, I thought you might like it. I like it. I think it's a good story. You might not think it's a good story. It's fine. Like, we can agree to disagree. All right. So many of my favorite things are things that other people might not have liked. Like, I have a lot of favorite horror movies or favorite comedy movies, which are not necessarily hits. They just like personally resonate with me. So, I mean, I'm going off possibly on a bit of a tangent here.
We're all about the tangent here.
Yeah, like, my hope with this book is not necessarily that, okay, this is the biggest hit in the world and like then I get to write for a living for the rest of my life. Like, that's not the intention. What I do want is for whoever reads this to come away with something that maybe they didn't have before. Like, my big ambition is for some readers to read this and have their lives changed. Right? I want some readers to read the whole book when it's finished and feel like a different person. That's what I want from the book. And I feel like that it's an artistic goal rather than a commercial goal, essentially. And the commercial goal, if I have any, is that I get to do the next book. Obviously, like I want Som to make a bunch of money. I don't want anyone to lose their money. I want the book to do well enough that when the next time I want to present a book to a publisher, they go like, yeah, like we'll work with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would like to do. Like I would like to continue doing like a book every couple of years. I am sort of toying between two ideas for which one to go with the next book. One is like about halfway towards an outline right now, and the other one is much more nascent. And yeah, like I just like the idea of lettering most of my time, and then once in a while coming here and like doing this thing and then going back.
Following your career over the last certainly 5-6 years, you doing lettering, you doing a lot of lettering, you being very open about burning out, about finding your, which I think was really, I mean, it wasn't helpful for you to go through it, but certainly you were open enough about it that it was good to know that this is a thing that could happen for people who are like, well, everybody else is doing things perfectly. You know, there must be something wrong with me. And if you're like somebody else is like, no, man, I really took on too much and I needed to adjust.
Yeah.
And to see you through your posts and your webpage and everything, to see you make those adjustments, to see you find your footing again, and to have this be such a, I wouldn't say this is autobiographical, but there is a presence there. So to see this come out and to see you start this new chapter that is such a progression from what you had been doing before is really satisfying as a reader / somebody who's followed your career.
Thank you.
Also, the book's really fucking good. Like, you know, you cast a whole bunch of people. I mean, we didn't even really talk about, you know, the color.
Francesco,
too much. Yeah. And the lettering's not bad. The lettering is not. The lettering is
I was
bad.
quite nervous about that, honestly. But like, I created a new font for this. I did a bunch of print tests and everything, obviously. But then I've used the font in Decidium, and I just got the Decidium free comic book day issue, and I was like, oh, the font looks fine, thank God. Like that, because again, it's a whole thing, right? Like you wanna. I actually toyed with the idea of hand lettering the book. And then Eric was like, hey, this is your first book. You might want to do a bunch of revisions. So let's not do that. I think that was very wise decision.
Slow your roll a little bit. Whether you hand lettered it or not, this is your book in a way that has to feel satisfying.
Yeah.
And, you know, I am really eager to obviously read the rest of it. I'm eager to see what else you have coming up. The next time you want to talk about any of that, there's an open invitation for you to come back.
I'm happy to do like a maybe post-game thing after the fourth issue comes out. And like we can just discuss everything. Because what you just said about it being personal to me, there's actually something I said, which I only realized halfway through writing issue 2, about the specific way in which this book is personal to me. And it's nothing to do with the story. Like it's something else. And I didn't even realize I was doing it till I was describing it to Som, like, this is why this needs to be that way. And I'm like, oh shit, that's what's happening here. Okay. I think there's some writing advice that I tend to very strongly disagree with, which is that you need to know what your story is about before you start writing, like thematically, etc. Because a lot of people want writing to be more efficient, which is kind of what leads us to all these structures, etc., etc. Like, I think honestly, if you're being honest, every story has a different structure. Every good story has a distinctive structure that is not the structure of any other story, other than the fact that every story has a beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
I don't believe in going into your story thematically, like knowing what you want to say thematically, right? And I'm glad I did that, because by the time I got to the end, I knew what the theme was, but I don't think I would have known it if I was in the middle of the story, right? And if I was trying to write to a theme, I think it would have been like issue 4 is sort of like a, you like it or hate it, like you love it or hate it kind of issue. And my hope is that you love it. Like Eric thinks that if anybody's read the first 3 issues, they're going to like this. So we're good on that.
Right.
But I don't think the reason that the first version of issue 4 I wrote and the second version of issue 4 I wrote are completely different, because I didn't know what I was talking about when I first kind of described the story to myself. It is only when I was properly writing the story that the theme was found what this is about. Sorry, I don't know why I went off on that, but it was something to do with like the idea that like the discovering a story in the middle of it, because I don't think you can do anything else. Like I've read stories where everything is clearly figured out from the beginning and they're boring as fuck. I don't enjoy those stories. I want a story to, when I'm watching a story, I don't necessarily want to know like what's going to happen next. I worked on so many stories in my life. So the most exciting thing for me is when I don't know where a story is going. And I don't think you can make that happen if the writer hasn't felt that at some point.
Do you think an adjustment to that could be, instead of like saying you have to have your theme before you start writing, is you have to have a theme? You don't have to have everything figured out, but you have to have a point to get to. And that will help kind of keep you moving in a way to when you get to the end, you're like, oh, shoot, I finished everything and I like it, but I did not land at the theme that I wanted. It's really this over here. But it gave, you know, that's how
I'd say that's fair enough. Yeah.
Your point about wanting things to be organic in a way that still holds together is something that is rarer than it should be. One of the things I think about for that is like the first season of Breaking Bad, where it was shortened by the writer's strike. And because of the shortened or whatever, the beats were different. And you're like, oh, we're 3 episodes into this, 7 or 8 episodes. So we should be doing, and now, of course, I can't remember what the actual thing was, but it was like, I don't know where this, and in comics, we have that as well. You have your 4-issue miniseries. This is probably more prevalent for like mainstream comics, like superhero sort of comics. You're like, okay, the first issue is usually this, the team gets together. The second is the thing, there's a blah, 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 blah. If you look back on the ones, probably the first time you read that, you were like, okay, that was amazing. But like afterwards, the stories that really stick in your brain are the ones that circumvent that or, invert that or just go off on some other,
like one of my favorite things I read recently was Dead Teenagers issue 1 by Jude Ellison Doyle and Caitlin Yasky, I think, where I read the first issue and then I immediately went back to page 1 and I read the whole thing again. Because it's doing everything an issue 1 should do, but it's doing like 5 other things. And it's doing the issue 1 thing almost as like a side thing, like almost casually. Like, okay, you need this, but that's not what this issue is about. It's about all this other stuff that's happening. And I genuinely went through the entire issue figuring out how much information they give about the concept on every page. Because by the end, you have an idea of the concept, but I don't think they've ever actually told you what the concept is.
Oh, that's interesting. So almost like mathifying this creative thing. Literally, what am I getting? What information is coming out? Okay. So then making it into, you're quantifying this not unquantifiable, but you're changing apples into oranges or whatever. I'll stop. But yeah, that's something that you do. Like you do that with lettering, you do that with your deep dives into like, how does Tom Warsakowski continue to blow my mind? Oh, because he's doing this, or how does John Workman do this, or how these other things. Like that is your, I want to say your Priyanka-ness. You need to hold on to something enough to be able to study it or whatever, but not to squeeze it too hard or you'll kill it, which is not something that everybody, it's not something that.
And then when I'm writing, and when I'm writing, I try not to think that way because I know I have read writers who are very smart, but their stories end up a little mechanistic because they're trying to control a bunch of these things. And I feel like you can, again, like this is what, like Ram's thing where you have to work with what's on the page. You can't overplan this to the point where it kind of sucks the life out of the thing. It has to be more instinctive, I feel, and as a creator, because you can read creators who are clearly critics, where they're coming from a point of view where they want to solve the story. But that's not what a story is for. That's an essay. Right. And you don't want to be writing essays. I mean, you want to be writing essays, but separately.
But not as something else. You don't want an essay wrapped in the skin of a story. And you're like, hey, this is not what it's not what it's supposed to be.
There are films I love. There's this French film called The Second Act, which has no real story. It's an essay. Like it's a fiction story. It's like there's a story there. I could describe the story to you. But that's not the point of the thing. It's the mechanistic part of it. But it's clearly having a lot of fun doing it and it's kind of enjoyable. But it's almost one of those things where you don't need to look at it again because you got the point. right? Because there was
Right.
nothing inside it other than that.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. It was fantastic. But I'm not going to be thinking about the characters. I'm not going to think, oh, why might she have done that? On the other hand, there's this wonderful director called Alice Rohrwacher, and she did this movie called La Chimera with Josh O'Connor in it. And there, again, you can see the essayistic aspects of it. Like there's a bit where this is clearly what the story is about. But then within that, there are all these beautiful details about people and how they behave towards each other and how they are counterpoints towards each other. Like there's the chaos of normal life, and yet it is controlled in a way that you are directed to what you should be looking at. Like that's not something that you can map out, and that's the thing that I think we can kind of leave on this, but we are going to come back again to Ram, where when we were working on Blue and Green, I was not a fan of jazz at the time. And I was like, could you talk this through with me? Like, I want to try and see what it's trying to do. And I mean, I'm going to paraphrase them, but all these jazz musicians really know what they do. Like they know how to play music to the sheet. They know how to do it technically. What they're trying to do here is to go off the technique and to try and reach somewhere that is between the notes, right? Try and reach a space that they can only reach in this live setting that cannot be defined by a note. It's something else. And I think that's what every artist should be trying to do, where I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff, but the thing I'm trying to communicate to you is none of those things. It's something between all of them.
I think that's a good note to end on. The book, In Your Skin, #1, really, really good. It will have come out on April 22nd, which is before this episode will air. I am going to hold you to coming back so we can talk about
I would love
2, 3,
that.
and 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, man.
So there you have it, folks. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you are given the opportunity to do so, because it really helps us out and we would super appreciate it. So, until we meet again, hopefully soon, my name is Greg. Stay safe, keep enjoying those funny books, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening. Systems disengaged.